Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take a stack of sources and extract the most important nuggets of knowledge for you.
Today, we're diving deep into something fundamental, the very definition of success.
Yeah, and our sources show that Gen Z isn't just tweaking the old rules. It looks like they're fundamentally rewriting them.
Absolutely. From how they approach careers, money, relationships, even mental health.
hmm
It feels like more than just a generational thing.
It really does, like a paradigm shift in what it even means to live a successful life.
So yeah, let's unpack this.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning then. The sources, they really hammer home this idea of a traditional success model. What did that look like exactly?
Right. Think 20th century standard playbook, maybe. You finished school, got a stable job.
Good benefits, pension. That's the dream, right?
Totally. Then marriage, house, kids,
Yeah.
climbing that corporate ladder until you could finally retire. It was, well, linear, predictable.
And very much measured by external stuff.
Exactly. Your job title, the house, the car, maybe even the watch. Success was something you sort of displayed. You showed the world you'd hit the marks.
Okay, and this is where, according to the sources, it all starts to break down for Gen Z. Why doesn't that model work now?
Well, the sources are pretty clear. The math just doesn't add up anymore. You've got soaring costs of living, crippling student debt for so many.
The housing crisis. I mean, forget buying a house in many places.
Right. Plus, economic instability seems constant. There's climate anxiety hanging over everything, maybe less trust in institutions.
So following that old formula, it doesn't guarantee security, let alone happiness, like it maybe once seemed to.
Precisely. They're looking at this path and thinking, hold on, this road, it seems blocked. Or maybe it leads somewhere I don't even want to end up.
So it's not that they don't want success. It's that that version of success feels unattainable or maybe even undesirable.
Exactly. They're questioning the map because the landscape has fundamentally changed.
Hmm.
They want a good life, sure, but they're insisting on defining it by their rules, their reality.
And one of the biggest shifts the sources point to is, well, it's where that definition is moving. From the outside in.
This is really key. Success for Gen Z, it seems, is becoming much more about an internal state, how you feel, not just what you possess.
Right. The sources give examples like being able to work fewer hours maybe from a beach, or just having time to paint or read.
Or even just consistently getting 8 hours of sleep. That's presented as a win, as success itself, not some lazy luxury.
It speaks to this deep desire for what? Freedom, authenticity, and definitely prioritizing mental well-being.
Yeah, when you hear them say, I just want peace, the sources suggest they really mean it, like a genuine state of inner calm, free from that constant pressure to strive.
Which is such a contrast to the hustle culture that really defined millennials, maybe.
Oh, absolutely. Gen V watched that. They saw the burnout, the anxiety, the toll it took. And it seems a lot of them are consciously opting out, saying no thank you.
It leads to that powerful idea from the sources.
Peace of mind is the new currency.
Yeah. Valued as much, maybe even more, than the big salary or the fancy title.
And another really interesting thread is how they're moving away from needing to be just one thing professionally.
Right. That old question, what do you want to be when you grow up? It feels almost quaint now, doesn't it?
It does. They're embracing this idea of being multi-hyphenate.
Mm.
Someone might be a software developer and really into ceramics, or a marketing manager and a Reiki practitioner.
They don't want to be put in a box.
Exactly. And digital platforms like TikTok, YouTube, Substack, they don't just allow this, they kind of fuel it, right?
Totally. You can have your main job, your side hustle, your online creative outlet, and it all sort of weaves together into this bigger picture of who you are.
And the key thing the sources emphasize is that Gen Z sees this fluidity as normal, desirable even.
Less like a straight career path, more like, what did the sources call it? A portfolio of identity.
Yeah, exactly that. Building a portfolio, not just climbing a ladder.
And speaking of those platforms, this generation grew up completely online. How does that fundamental experience change their definition of success?
Oh, it changes pretty much everything. Success isn't just your offline achievements anymore. It's tied up with online visibility, your following, engagement.
Your online presence is part of your professional brand, often.
It's intrinsic for many. And this has blown open the doors to entirely new ways of making a living. The sources talk about Twitch streamers, TikTok chefs, Instagram poets, AI artists.
Careers that literally didn't exist not that long ago.
Right. They're making real money doing it. The traditional gatekeepers like publishers or networks, they just don't hold all the power anymore.
Sometimes all it takes is a phone, an idea, and persistence.
Exactly. Authenticity helps too. So the actual rules about what counts as a legitimate career, they're being rewritten on the fly, largely by this generation.
Now let's shift to something the sources highlight as truly revolutionary, their approach to mental health.
This feels like a massive generational shift.
Hmm.
Compared to older generations where, therapy might have been hush-hush, emotions were things to keep in check.
Right, something to control, not explore.
Gen Z talks openly about trauma, about setting boundaries, about anxiety, about healing. It's just part of the conversation, part of their understanding of what it means to be well.
So success isn't just about being rich or powerful. It's about being, what's the word they use? Regulated.
Yeah, finding emotional stability, resilience. They seem to value emotional literacy, self-awareness incredibly highly, sometimes maybe even more than traditional status symbols.
It really does feel revolutionary, that public prioritization of mental wellness.
And you hear it in how they talk.
Hmm.
That quote the sources picked up on, I don't want to be in survival mode anymore. Wow.
That's such a direct pushback against grind culture, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's a rejection of that idea that you have to destroy yourself to succeed. They're asking the fundamental question.
What's the point of it all if I'm miserable?
Exactly. What's the point of achieving success if the process or the result leaves you feeling empty or broken?
Okay, but let's be clear. The sources definitely say Gen Z does care about money. It's not like finances are irrelevant.
No, not at all. But their approach seems different. There's a layer of skepticism, maybe, towards the old corporate path.
Understandable, given they grew up seeing recessions, layoffs, economic uncertainty.
Right. So instead of relying on one big salary, you see this focus on building multiple income streams. Diversification.
Like freelancing, investing, maybe crypto or NFTs for some, drop shipping, side hustles, spreading the risk.
Or there's the other path the sources mention. Consciously simplifying their lives, making deliberate choices to prioritize time and freedom over just accumulating more stuff.
That example the sources used was striking. The 21-year-old making less money, but feeling freer and more successful working for themselves.
Then someone maybe double their age, making six figures, but feeling stuck in that corporate cage.
It really highlights that shift in mindset from accumulation
To autonomy. Control over your time, your life, your energy. That seems to be the prize for many.
And zooming out, the sources show this redefinition isn't just about work and money, right? It extends to broader social norms.
Oh, yeah. Views on things like marriage often seen as optional, or at least not the only valid path. Having kids, a much more deliberate choice, not an assumption.
And identity itself seems much more fluid, more expansive. Gender, self-expression.
They seem to be actively questioning and dismantling a lot of the rigid societal boxes they inherited, creating space for people to define themselves more authentically across the board.
And the sources do point out this isn't necessarily easy.
No, it takes real courage. You're often going against family expectations, generational patterns.
And you definitely face criticism sometimes from those who prefer the old rules.
For sure. But the potential outcome, as the sources suggest, is maybe a culture that's more inclusive, more self-aware,
More human.
perhaps more accepting of complexity.
Something else that jumped out was who Gen Z looks up to. Their heroes aren't always the polished, perfect figures.
Right. There seems to be this pull towards people who are, well, real, flawed, funny, vulnerable. Honesty seems valued over perfection.
Like the examples in the sources of YouTube therapists talking openly, neurodivergent influencers sharing their experiences, people talking honestly about burnout.
They want relatability. They want to see the struggle, not just the glossy endpoint. It's almost like,
show me your scars, then I'll believe your success story.
exactly, which is such a huge departure from that highly curated Instagram perfect era that came just before. It's a move towards like radical realism.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the positive aspects, the liberation, the authenticity, but the sources also raise some potential downsides, a kind of dark side to this shift.
Yes, and it's important to acknowledge that this very individualized path to success, while freeing, can also create a lot of uncertainty and anxiety.
If you're the one defining everything, the pressure is immense, right? The pressure to constantly self-optimize, perform online.
It can be overwhelming.
Right.
And we absolutely have to talk about the inequality aspect. It's
Crucial point. Not everyone has the same access to technology or the education or the financial safety net to just, quit their job and follow their passion.
exactly. This kind of fluid, multi-hyphenate life isn't equally available to everyone. That's a reality we can't ignore.
And even for those who can pursue it, there's a risk of trading one kind of burnout for another.
Yeah. The pressure to constantly be on, to manage multiple projects, to be your own brand, that can be just as draining as the old corporate grind, just in a different way.
So it's both, isn't it? There's real liberation here, but also fragility and unequal access.
Holding both those truths seems essential.
So bringing this all together, what are the main takeaways for you listening to this deep dive?
Well, the sources paint a picture of Gen Z not as lazy or entitled labels they sometimes get hit with, but is pretty perceptive, actually,
Intelligent enough to see a system isn't working for them.
and brave enough to question it and start building something new. They're actively imagining different ways to live, to define what a meaningful life looks like.
And that definition seems centered on these core human values, meaning freedom, mental well-being, authenticity.
And honestly, it feels like there's a lesson in there for everyone, regardless of your generation.
It really makes you think.
The most powerful thing, I think, that comes out of these sources is realizing that the rules of success, they were never set in stone.
They were always just made up,
I-
agreed upon for a time.
Exactly. And if they were made up, they can be rewritten by any generation or even any individual who dares to question them.
So maybe the big question this deep dive leaves you with isn't just how do I get success, but
What does success actually mean to me? Like really, deep down.
and if your answer to that changes over your lifetime, the sources suggest that's not failure, that's just growth.
That's evolution. That's being human.
That's all the time we have for this deep dive. If this got you thinking, maybe share it with someone, leave us a review, or just start your own conversation about what success looks like now.
We'll be back next time, going deep into more of the ideas and people shaping our world.
Until then, maybe take a moment to define your own success.
And maybe, just maybe, break a few outdated rules while you're at it.